Number 8. Miata Fan. In 2014, news sources around the world reported that a pregnant 24-year-old Chicago woman named Miata Fan had been accused of killing her unborn child's father because he didn't buy her a gift during a shopping trip. According to prosecutors, Fan became jealous when her boyfriend, 28-year-old Larry Martin, bought things for his cousin and son, but not for her. Fan allegedly hit Martin during the drive home, nearly causing an accident, and then drove off in his car when they stopped somewhere. Martin and his cousin walked to the apartment that he and Fan shared, but were locked outside when they arrived. Fan was accused of stabbing Martin after finally letting him come inside. His cousin overheard his screams and managed to get him outside the apartment and applied pressure to his wounds. But sadly, Martin died from his injuries, and Fan was charged with first-degree murder. Strangely, there appear to have been no updates on the case since the story first broke, leaving the outcome of the criminal case unclear. Number 7. Diadra Orosco. In 2014, footage of an SUV ramming into a car on a highway in Tracy County, California went viral. The victims accused 50-year-old Diadra Orosco of cutting them off twice and trying to run their small Mazda off the road. When one of the women in the Mazda got annoyed and gave Orosco the middle finger, it only seemed to further enrage her. Footage showed Orosco's truck pulling in front of the car, giving the victims no choice but to stop. The suspect approached the Mazda and knocked on the window while holding up some sort of ID and allegedly claiming to be a highway deputy. Unconvinced that the erratic driver was a member of law enforcement, the victims pulled away and were once again chased by the pickup truck, which eventually rear-ended their car. After finally reaching safety, the women called 911. In a jailhouse interview with ABC 7, Orosco claimed that the woman driving the Mazda had nearly hit several cars while texting behind the wheel. She denied impersonating a police officer and said that she was trying to make a citizen's arrest and was showing her bail bondsman card through the window. Other witnesses accused Orosco of driving dangerously and forcing her way into traffic in places where there was almost no room for her vehicle. Just days earlier, Orosco had been arrested in connection with a hit-and-run in Roseville, California. The other driver involved in the incident accused Orosco of hitting his car and threatening to smash his windows after she cut him off in traffic. According to a report, Orosco then drove to a friend's house and threw rocks at the other driver's car as it passed by. During her interview with ABC 7 following the second road rage incident, Orosco admitted that she was upset about having spent several days in jail without her chronic pain medication. According to record, she pleaded no contest to making threats to commit a crime resulting in death and assault with a deadly weapon. As a result, Orosco was sentenced to 925 days in jail, followed by 5 years of probation. Number 6. Trevor Dal. 22-year-old Daniel Alejo was driving in Fishers, Indiana one day in November 2022 when he happened upon an Acura that was sitting still in the road with the brake lights on. He honked and drove around the car, which soon began following him. Alejo later told Fox 59 that the Acura got so close to his Honda that he brake-checked the driver, which only made the enraged motorist behind him even more angry. Alejo was approaching the Maya grocery store that he planned to shop at when the Acura cut him off. He decided that shopping could wait and turned his car around with the intention of getting out of the situation entirely. But the Acura followed him, and the driver eventually pulled up beside him and fired at least 3 shots into his car. The young man was struck, but survived his injuries, and police arrested 24-year-old Trevor Dal for attempted murder, aggravated battery, criminal recklessness, and pointing a firearm. A passenger who was in the vehicle with him said that he often gets upset while driving, and Dahl's girlfriend reportedly admitted to police that he has anger issues at times. Just days earlier, Dahl had allegedly gotten angry at the driver of a salt truck in Noblesville, Indiana, for forcing him to slow down while driving. The driver told police that Dahl threatened to kill him and fired a single shot into the air before peeling away from the scene. After connecting him with this incident following the second shooting, authorities charged him with additional counts of intimidation and criminal recklessness. In the end, Dahl pleaded guilty to the attempted murder charge and was sentenced to 37 years in prison. Number 5. Jeremy Scapi. Over a 3-month period starting in March 2022, 4 homeless Indigenous Canadian women were murdered in Winnipeg by a 35-year-old suspected serial killer named Jeremy Scapi. 3 of the victims were identified as Rebecca Contois, Morgan Harris, and Mercedes Moran. A 4th victim, known only as Mashkode Bijiki Ikwe, or the Buffalo Woman, remains unidentified to this day. Scapi pleaded not guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder and will go on trial during the spring of 2024. According to authorities, he has a documented history of violence toward women. In the years leading up to the serial killings, he was accused of threatening to kill 2 romantic partners, both of whom were of Indigenous descent, and in addition, he was convicted of assaulting one of the women. Charges relating to the second assault case were started in late 2021, just months before the first of the 4 murders, after the victim suffered from memory issues stemming from a concussion she suffered several years earlier. According to the woman's mother, Scapi chased a woman with a knife, punched her in the face, and hit her over the head with a cane. He was also accused of violating an order of protection that banned him from contacting the victim. While investigating Scapi's possible motives for the murders, CBC journalists discovered a Facebook page linked to the accused serial killer that was filled with violent, misogynistic, and white supremacist material. Activists have argued that the government's refusal to pursue hate-related charges in cases involving the murders of Indigenous women have amounted to a race-based genocide throughout Canada. At the very least, the content on Scapi's alleged Facebook page certainly suggests that his beliefs may have played a role in the unchecked anger he showed toward the unfortunate women who crossed his path. Number 4. Raymond Clark. Annie Lair was a 24-year-old doctoral student working at Yale University's New Haven, Connecticut campus when she was murdered in September 2009. 5 days later, her body was found stuffed in a basement wall in one of the research buildings where she worked. Autopsy results revealed that she'd been assaulted and strangled to death. 4 days after the discovery of Annie's body, authorities arrested 24-year-old Raymond J. Clark III, an animal research technician who worked in the same building as Annie. Clark's ex-girlfriend, Jessica Del Rocco, told ABC News that the accused killer had anger problems and physically abused her. She described Clark as extremely well-liked among his peers and said that he seemed like the perfect boyfriend at the beginning of their relationship. But Del Rocco recalled a distinct change in Clark's behavior about 3 months after they began dating. She said he became controlling and began imposing rules about how she dressed, who she was allowed to be friends with, and even how she spoke. Police reportedly told the young woman not to go into detail about the physical abuse, but she said that Clark used to get a certain look in his eyes when he was about to become violent, at which point she usually went along with his demands in order to avoid a fight. Clark had no romantic past with Annie and never explained why he killed her, but her murder clearly reflected his capacity to become explosively violent, even toward women he wasn't dating. He pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to 44 years in prison and will be 70 years old when he's released in 2053. But of course, that's only if he makes it that long. Number 3. Evie Amarti. After a Tinder date ended in rejection for 26-year-old Evie Amarti in January 2017, she erupted into a fit of rage and decided to take her anger out on innocent customers at a 7-Eleven store in Sydney. Horrifying surveillance footage showed the woman entering the store and swinging an axe into bystander Benjamin Rimmer's face. She struck the victim twice, knocking him to the floor as blood gushed from his head. Amarti then attacked another innocent onlooker named Sharon Hacker, and as a result, she was charged with 2 counts of attempted murder. During Amarti's trial, Rimmer testified that he felt lucky to be alive, which he credited with his quick-thinking decision to turn his head just before the axe struck his skull. If he hadn't moved, he said his face would have been sliced in half. He further stated that he believed Amarti went to the 7-Eleven store on a mission to kill. The court also heard about how Amarti was on a recreational stimulant called MDA and had consumed cannabis and vodka before the attack. The defendant blamed her behavior on her failed date with Makila Jansen, who she accused of finding her unattractive because she's transgender. Around the same time of the axe attack, Amarti sent Jansen a text message stating, "One day I will kill a lot of people and it will be your fault." Amarti was also accused of sending a crazy message to one of Janssen's friends who joined the women for drinks earlier that evening. She claimed that during her trial that she'd heard voices telling her to kill and maim and start the rise of hell on Earth. The troubled young woman was found guilty of 2 counts of attempted murder after the court rejected her attempt to blame her actions on mental illness. Amarti was sentenced to 9 years in prison, with the requirement to serve at least 4.5 years behind bars before becoming eligible for parole. The seemingly lenient punishment left Rimmer, Hacker, and their supporters feeling outraged, sparking widespread demands for Amarti's sentence to be increased. Crown prosecutors appealed for a longer prison term, and just months after being handed her original term, Amarti was sentenced to 14 years in prison with a mandatory non-parole period of 8 years. Speaking with ABC Australia outside the courtroom, Hacker said that Amarti's punishment still didn't reflect the severity of her crime, but the increased sentence meant that her attacker would have a better chance of sorting out her emotional problems. Hacker told reporters that the outcome gave her the closure she needed to move on with her life, and one can only hope that Rimmer also felt satisfied with the new sentence. Number 2. Jake Davidson. In August 2021, a relative of 51-year-old Maxine Davidson called the police and said that the woman's mentally ill son was holding her captive at their home in Plymouth, England. Before police could arrive, 22-year-old Jake Davidson fatally shot his mother and left the house. He proceeded to kill 4 strangers and injured 2 others over an 8-minute period. But by the time officers found him, Davidson was also dead. Unable to question the mass killer about his motives, investigators looked to Davidson's past to try explaining his behavior. Back when he was a teenager, his mother had expressed concerns over his isolated nature and his obsession with guns. In 2016, Davidson was accused of attacking a man and his pregnant girlfriend, but avoided criminal charges. He lost his gun license in 2020 following an alleged assault on 2 people, but his weapons were returned to him the following year. More recently, Davidson had expressed misogynistic and homophobic views. He self-identified as an incel or involuntary celibate and voiced his frustrations over not being able to find a girlfriend. Davidson often took to Reddit to rant about his deep hatred towards his mother over money-related disagreements, and a neighbor told reporters that the two had recently had a major falling out over Davidson's hatred toward women. The incel movement has been linked to numerous acts of deadly violence in recent years, with many justifying their actions based on the entitled belief that their victims, and the world in general, deserve to pay for the incel's romantic and personal failures. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. Number 1. Eric Locke. 31-year-old Sonia Blount and 32-year-old Eric Locke met in October 2013 while working at a factory in Dublin, Ireland, and began dating soon after. The relationship ended in early 2014 after Locke became irrationally jealous of her for attracting male attention while they were out on a date. Sonia had been in an abusive relationship before and didn't want to risk history repeating itself. Locke begged Sonia for another chance. She pleaded with him to leave her alone, but he intensified his attention-seeking behavior by walking off the job and threatening to hurt himself. He was briefly hospitalized for a mental evaluation and continued trying to contact Sonia after his release. Sonia remained cordial toward Locke, but she became worried when he returned to work and wouldn't stop staring at her, and when he implied that Sonia had started a rumor about him stalking her. She blocked her former fling on her phone, but Locke refused to let go of his obsession with Sonia. Using a fake Facebook profile under the name Shane Cully, Locke befriended his unsuspecting ex and persuaded her to meet one evening at a hotel. After entering the room, he stuffed a t-shirt into Sonia's mouth and strangled her to death with a phone cord. Locke turned himself into police a few days later and said he'd planned to tie Sonia up and make her listen while he told her about the suffering she'd put him through. He also admitted to killing her when she got scared and wouldn't stay quiet. His attorney urged the court to find Locke guilty of a reduced manslaughter charge due to mental illness, but an expert testified that the defendant appeared to be driven by extreme anger and a desire for revenge. This didn't qualify him for a diminished responsibility ruling, though. So in the end, he was convicted of murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Number 9. Lulu Sza. After meeting in Houston in 2007, divorced single dad Raymond Sza and Maria de Lourdes Durantes, or Lulu, got married and opened a gym together. But things changed between them after Lulu became an American citizen. She was no longer warm and loving, according to Raymond, and she frequently reminded him that she was now entitled to the same rights as and benefits as him. Raymond didn't understand exactly what his wife meant. After all, he had always tried to respect her and didn't think he was trampling on her rights in any way. It wasn't long before he noticed the couple's money disappearing, but he fought to make the marriage work, even as Lulu became increasingly cold and distant. He finally gave up in 2015. The estranged partners entered acrimonious divorce proceedings while continuing to live under the same roof. As if that wasn't awkward enough, the police contacted Raymond and told him that Lulu was planning to kill him for insurance money and ownership of their shared assets. A boxer who knew the couple had overheard Lulu talking about wanting her husband dead at the gym one day. He volunteered to find someone to do the job and Lulu took the bait, but he went to the police instead. To avoid arousing Lulu's suspicion, Raymond carried on as usual until the planned assassination date. With help from law enforcement, he posed for proof photos of his body that the hitman had agreed to provide to Lulu. When she saw a picture of Raymond lying in a shallow pit with what looked like a bullet wound to the head, she smiled. But as it turned out, the joke was on her the whole time. Lulu pleaded guilty to solicitation of murder and received a sentence of up to 20 years. Raymond forgave her but moved on with his life and found true love with a new partner. Number 8. Nathan Carman. In 2016, the crew of a commercial ship found 22-year-old Nathan Carman adrift at sea on a life raft. He had spent 8 days floating aimlessly in the Atlantic after his boat sank off Rhode Island during a fishing trip. Carman's mother, Linda, died in the sinking. Her body was never found. The tragedy came 3 years after someone fatally shot Nathan Carman's grandfather, a wealthy Connecticut businessman named John Chikalis. Carman inherited around $550,000 from his grandfather's estate, but reportedly blew through it all shortly before the boating accident. Relatives had always suspected Nathan of being responsible for Chikalis' death, and when Linda was presumed lost at sea, they believed the young man had engineered her death and disappearance. And they didn't have to look too hard to find a motive. As Linda Carman's sole heir, Nathan stood to inherit around $7 million after his mother's death. Prosecutors would later contend that there was an ongoing family feud over the estate. He continued to walk free until 2022, when federal authorities indicted him on a slew of charges, including murder on the high seas and 7 fraud-related counts. Prosecutors are accusing him of scuttling the boat and have pointed out how the insurance company refused to pay Carman for the boat's loss because there was evidence that he had deliberately rendered the vessel unseaworthy. Carman maintains his innocence from behind bars amid ongoing trial delays at his lawyer's request. Number 7. Blake Leibel. Ayanna Kasayan's mother reported her missing in 2016 after she suddenly fell out of touch, which was extremely out of character. Police tried contacting Ayanna's live-in fiancé, Canadian real estate heir Blake Leibel, and they knocked on the front door of the couple's home in West Hollywood, California, but got no response. They eventually forced their way in and found a mattress barricading the door. Officers found Leibel hiding in the master bedroom behind yet another barricaded door. He claimed Ayanna was at the hospital and refused to come out. When the police finally made their way inside the bedroom, they found Ayanna dead with her scalp removed. She had lost nearly half the blood in her body, and the scene was horrifying beyond what words can describe. Numerous news sources described it as the grisliest murder in the history of West Hollywood, and possibly in all of Los Angeles. Leibel had moved to California with dreams of making it big as a graphic novelist and a film director. Unlike many aspiring artists, he had ample money to live off of thanks to his trust fund. His motive for murdering Ayanna remains unclear to this day. Some speculate that he had an obsession with gore and was acting out a fantasy similar to a storyline in one of his graphic novels. Prosecutors, on the other hand, painted Leibel as a power-hungry control freak who was jealous over the amount of time and attention Ayanna was giving to their child. He was convicted of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Number 6. Hans Christian Rousing. As the heir to a multi-billion-dollar Swedish packaging fortune, Hans Christian Rousing had the luxury of directing his future without having to worry about money. Instead of going into the family business, he spent the younger part of his adulthood traveling the world. He ended up in drug rehab in the US, where he met his wife Eva. The couple married in 1992 and went on to build a rehab center in Barbados. They also donated millions of dollars to drug awareness and addiction prevention charities and organizations. But the couple's own problems with drugs were far from over. In 2008, they were arrested for allegedly trying to sneak small amounts of heroin and crack into the United States Embassy in London. Addiction consumed the pair as they became increasingly isolated from their friends and family. They retreated to a room in their London mansion and banned anyone from entering. In 2012, Hans was arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence of drugs. It led to the discovery of Eva's decomposing corpse in the squalid room where the couple had spent most of their time in recent years. She had died 2 months earlier and was found on a bed beneath a pile of clothes. Rousing pleaded guilty to delaying the burial of Eva's body and received a suspended prison sentence while he underwent a mandatory 2-year drug rehab program. At his sentencing, he said that he didn't have a very coherent memory of the events leading up to Eva's death and admitted that he didn't report it because he didn't want her to leave. Number 5. Kenneth Atkinson and Nathan Detroit. 34-year-old Ray Atkinson Jr. and his fiancée, 29-year-old Natasha Newby, were bludgeoned to death in Bend, Oregon in 2020. Their bodies were found in a home that was previously owned by Atkinson's late father, Ray Sr., who had died the previous year. At the time, Ray Jr. was entangled in a dispute with his brother, Kenneth Atkinson, over their father's estate. Ray Sr. had left behind no will, leaving the brothers at odds over the $400,000 he left behind. Authorities suspected Kenneth of masterminding the crime and hiring his nephew, Nathan Detroit, to carry out the hit. After more than a year of investigating, they charged Kenneth Atkinson and Nathan Detroit each with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. While the arrests marked a major step forward in the case, the wait for justice continues for the victims' loved ones. Kenneth's trial is slated to begin in late 2023, while Nathan's trial is scheduled for early 2024. Number 4. Alcibiades David. Until relatively recently, Greek-American businessman Alcibiades Alki David was known as the heir to a multi-billion-dollar Coca-Cola fortune and as the successful owner of numerous companies, including a modeling agency and a streaming website. He had experienced some legal problems in the past, but his life really started to fall apart in 2019 when he was arrested on the Caribbean island of St. Kitts for allegedly having more than $1.3 million worth of cannabis on board his private jet. That same year, a jury ordered David to pay $11 million to a former employee who accused him of firing her when she turned down his advances. He has steadfastly refused to pay the settlement and has been uncooperative with court proceedings meant to resolve the matter. David claims to be broke and bled dry of funds, even though his worth was estimated at $2.8 billion around the time the initial judgment against him was made. During a hearing to determine the value of his assets, he allegedly launched into a bizarre tirade about conspiracy theories and corruption. He alleged that he had somehow been set up, although he didn't make much sense, and the judge refused to entertain the rambling diatribe. David was a no-show at the next scheduled hearing. His lawyer, Dana Cole, told the judge that his client had been on a downward spiral in recent months, describing the episode as akin to a mental health crisis. There have reportedly been talks about placing David under a conservatorship, which would mean that a trustee would be appointed to manage his financial affairs, giving him little to no control over his money. He most recently made headlines for verbally lashing out at the California State Bar Office in downtown Los Angeles. Number 3. VOR Youth Uidia. In 2012, Red Bull Air VOR Youth Uidia was accused of the hit-and-run death of a police officer in Bangkok, Thailand. Police traced a trail of brake fluid to the estate of the country's second richest family, where they found a badly damaged Ferrari. A servant was initially blamed, but VOR Youth was found to have excessive alcohol in his blood, which he claimed was from drinking at home. He was charged with speeding, fleeing the scene of an accident, and reckless driving causing death. Yet he managed to evade authorities for a decade after fleeing Thailand in a private jet. In the meantime, his family paid the victim's family around $100,000. For years, VOR Youth made one excuse after another for not turning himself in, often claiming he was out of the country on business. Photos that surfaced told a different story of a globe-trotting trust fund baby who shamelessly ignored his legal case while living the high life. It took 5 years for an arrest warrant to be issued, and an investigation team was disbanded fairly early on in the case amid allegations of covering up VOR Youth's actions. In 2020, Thai authorities dropped all charges against VOR Youth, sparking outrage among the general public over what felt to many like an obvious case of privilege prevailing over the law. Protests erupted in the streets of Bangkok, and many demonstrators were punished. The charges were reissued later that year, only to be dropped again in 2022. Number 2. Anthony Prate. 48-year-old Malgorzata Margaret Daniel was found stabbed to death in her Schaumburg, Illinois apartment in 2019. Authorities charged her boyfriend, 55-year-old eye doctor Anthony Prate, with first-degree murder. He was initially locked up at the Cook County Jail, where dozens of phone calls with family members were recorded. In the conversations, Prate could be heard instructing relatives to liquidate more than $1 million in assets and transfer property out of his name in case there's any weird lawsuits. Prate eventually bonded out and was released on an ankle monitor to his mother's home. He was still awaiting trial in late 2021 when he died from COVID-19 related complications, but the drama over his money was far from over. The victim's daughters filed a wrongful death suit against Prate's heirs. When the complainant's attorneys caught wind of Prate's conversations with family members about making money and assets disappear, they filed amended complaints accusing Prate and his alleged co-conspirators of fraudulently transferring assets. These jailhouse conversations were used as the main basis for the lawsuits. If successful, then it means that Prate's surviving loved ones may have to cough up some of the money they're accused of moving around. Another lawsuit filed on behalf of the victim's estate sought the $300,000 Prate had posted for bail. Number 1. Tracy Grom. There was no questioning whether Tracy Grom killed her estranged husband, Hunter Grom, in 2012. She approached him at his workplace and shot him 6 times at point-blank range. But her level of guilt under the eyes of a jury would depend entirely on why. Tracy's defense lawyer, Warren Freeman, argued that his client acted in defense of herself and her children. He said that Tracy went to Hunter's work to take photos that would prove he was earning an income and could afford the $2,100 monthly alimony payments she was asking for as part of their divorce settlement. Freeman also said that Tracy suffered brutal spousal abuse that left her with permanent injuries that required her to wear a colostomy bag. Hunter allegedly told Tracy that he was going to make it so that nobody would ever want her again, and threatened to kill her if she reported the abuse to police. But according to the prosecutor, Tracy was motivated by the prospect of collecting on a $100,000 insurance policy in Hunter's name. In a statement, Attorney General Luther Strange accused Tracy of casting false blame on the victim and stressed the importance of convicting her in the case. The jury found her guilty, but one of the jurors asked the judge for leniency due to the alleged abuse that Tracy endured. She was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison and will become eligible for parole in 2029. Would you rather share a jail cell with an accused serial killer who's typically quiet and respectful but has a reputation for flying off the handle without warning or reason, or a loud-mouthed, non-violent offender with unbearable body odor? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.